This is round 2 of our intro to Photoshop. Where I left off abruptly was we had recently talked about the tools and that these tools are dynamic to the options toolbar. We also talked about that Photoshop and all Adobe products are what are called panel programs, and all of the panels can be flown and docked, and they can also be found underneath the window function. If you feel like at any time that your window gets kind of disappears or funny things up here, come into this window and you can see the check marks mean that those are showing. If you ever need to go back and quote unquote get some other toolbars and panels, you can come back to Reset Essentials and it will come back to look like my screen. I can tell I'm in transparent mode because of the checkerboard. I'm going to go over a couple of things before you guys get started with your composite. For this first project for Underwater Collage, we're going to focus on these top 4 tools, which are, this is the Move tool, then you have your different selection tool. Now this is also called a marching ant because you'll see that the marquee moves, and so a marching ant will appear. When you click and hold, you have different options. When you tap and hold, these are your different lasso tools. These are, again, these second, third, and fourth tools are what are known as selection tools. Okay, and they're going to help us with our composite. Our composite of our underwater basically means we're going to take our underwater structure, we're going to take the scuba diver or the fish, we're going to cut out or select an area, then go to our Move tool and move it over to our original. The next thing we're going to focus on would be the text tool. And again, if I click on the text tool, my font is dynamic on the top. My size can be either physically changed or scrubbed up or scrubbed down. Anytime you see a color block, this will give you a color picker. So I can change my color as necessary by really any color block on your Photoshop document. So for example, I can tell that my green, I can come down to my foreground color and it also pops up as green. Another note of interest is if you hover over a tool for a half a second, it will tell you what that tool is, number one, and what the keyboard shortcut is to it also. So if I click on any of the color blocks, it will pop open this color picker. And you have options to move into your spectrum. You have options to move into RGB or CMYK. You also have the pound is what's called a hex code, and that's mainly for web development. So I can even come to my color panel and change the color this way. So really there are just numerous ways. The tricky thing with the text box is I always say in Photoshop when you create text you have to know what you want before you make it originally. So I'm going to click and drag this text box. Let me change it to a font that looks good. And I'm going to say fish. Okay, I can change the font size. I can change the font color. Okay, these are what are called my character and paragraph panels. So remember, we can also toggle in, toggle out. This changes your how far apart, which is what we call leading. This can change your horizontal and your vertical percentage. You can also create italics, strike through, small caps. This changes the tracking, leading. There's all kinds of different things you can experiment through this character panel, and that toggles, toggle, toggle. Okay, and then the really cool thing is that once I have a check mark here, that means I'm going to commit my edit. So I click on the check mark. Guess I'm going to Control Z that. Apologize, I'm just going to remake that. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. Super fun. When I click on my check mark, I will have committed what I've wanted to do. And now I have a little bit more flexibility. I can tell when I click back on my layers panel, I'm just going to go ahead and fly this out here because it's so important. I have one text layer. Okay, that is fish. I can rename this to like bluefish so I can keep track of exactly what this layer, because when you get a huge project, you'll have 20, 25, even sometimes 50 layers in a project. So I can tell that I have a text layer, I have renamed it, and I'm selecting my layer in order to make any changes. I'm going to come up to Warp Text, and then I'm just going to play around with these different um, effects just to show you what can or can't be done. You can change here. That's awesome. So again, I'm making sure on my layers, on my relayer panel, I've got character panel, I've toggled back and forth between my options toolbar. If you do not see what I see in the options toolbar, making sure that your text tool is selected. Now this fish seems a little bit small. I want it to be fairly significant top quarter of my document. So I'm going to do a little trick called transform. I can do it by edit, free transform, or edit transform. These will give you options. These are all different things I would like for you to try, please. If I go to free transform, you can tell that I have a bounding box. And from here, I can really resize. I'm holding down Shift on the corners to resize in proportion. And you can, let's see, switch and change. Anyway, I'm going to kind of pull it out here and then move it back. I'm doing all of this through a Command T or a Control T, or also up to your edit down to your free transform and transform options. Remember how I said that hovering over that tool gave me the keyboard shortcut? Well, this little star kind of four corners loop is your Command key on a Mac, and T, which is also a Control T on your PC. So to commit that edit, I click on the check mark button, and I still have my layer. I can go to my move tool if I want to move it right in the middle here, or I can put this right on this side. Actually, I'm going to put it right here in the bottom. So I'm just simply using my move tool. So that's an introduction to the text tool.